Most frequently, the type of data that the user will be putting into a web page or web application is going to be text data.
This video is brought to you by OppiePie's Academy.
So we're going to learn how to create two types of text data entry boxes. So generally, each element in which the user is going to type information has to be labeled. So there's a label tag just for that. So let's say first we're asking for the user's name. So I'm going to use the label tag, and I'm simply going to put the word name as the content of the label tag. I'm also going to use the for attribute, which is going to link the label tag to the actual text box. Now, the way we develop the text box is input type equals text. And this will actually generate the text box. But we also want to include an ID. The ID value has to match the value of the for label here in the label itself. So we have label for name, and then we have input type equals text ID name. Let's close that tag like that. So this is what links the two of these up and makes them work together. So far we see the word name because of what we have here, and they're linked by the for and the ID. Now, in order to get this sent to our process PHP, which is really our fictional page where the action is going to take place, we don't have a process.php to process this, it's fictional. But in order to get it there, in addition to an ID, we need an additional attribute. I know this is a little confusing, but I'm actually going to use the value name again. Now, only form attributes with the name attribute here, so only form items like this input with a name attribute will be passed to the actual server page, process.php. If I didn't add this, it would not be processed by the server. Let's go ahead and do one more. Let's ask for the user's email. So the value email right there for email, we'll label this with email address. This text, of course, is what appears to the user on the form. And then input type equals text. That's what gives us the text box. ID equals email to link it to the label. And then name equals email, so we send it to the server. I think we've done enough where we can take a look at this, so I'm going to go ahead and save, and let's pop it up in the browser. And here you can see we've got our name and email address. Let's put a blank between the two of these. So let's add a break right there, so these appear on separate lines. That's a little bit better. Now, by the way, one of the advantages of linking the label to the actual input is this. If I click on the label, see how the cursor starts flashing in the associated text box? And now the user could type in here, just like that. Let's do one more text box, just regular text box. So we've asked for name, email address. Let's ask for country of residence. So there's our label. I used just country for the for, because again, we're just matching it here. Input type is text. That's what gives us the text box. ID, country. And I'm going to make the name match. The name doesn't have to match. I just find it less confusing to be consistent there. And let's add another break so everything appears on separate lines. All right, so we can bring up our browser again. And we've saved, so I'll refresh. And now we have name, email, and country of residence. So the user can type in any of these fields. Now, sometimes we want an actual longer text box. We want more than just a couple of lines. So we can actually create what's called a text area. It works behind the scenes the same way, but the text area provides multiple lines in which the user can type information. So let's label it. Let's ask for the user's life story. probably never wise to actually ask for this, because some people will give it to you. So this time we're going to use the text area tag, and I'm going to ID it as life story. And I'm going to also do a for here life story like this. You've got to formally close the text area tag with /text area. And you actually could put in here what you want by default in the text area. So let's say type your life story here. All right, so let's go ahead and save. And again, let's look at our little browser window here. And I forgot to do the break. Let's add that just to keep things neat. Perfect. So you can see here it says type your life story here, and the user could go in here and start typing. This is my life story. I think that might look a little neater on the next line, so let's add another break tag. Oh yeah, I think that looks a lot better. Now, by default, this text area is stretchable like this, so the user can adjust the size. You also can adjust the size in the HTML. You can use the CSS too, but commonly I see this done in HTML. So first we can set the cols, which is actually the number of columns or number of characters wide this is. So if we set it to 50, and I save there using Command S, let's take a look at the result in the browser. See how it's wider now? And if we set it to 75, it would be even wider. Now, the reason you do this is kind of a clue to the user how much data you actually want them to type. And let's also set the rows, which is how we'll set the height. Let's set that to 5. Again, we'll save, and let's refresh. Now we'll get 5 rows. So that's how we can size the text box. Now, you may be wondering why we have this space right here. And it's because we actually have this space right here. If you want that to be right at the top corner of the text box, just go ahead and move that to the end of your opening text area tag and save. And now it'll look just perfect. The user can still adjust the size, but kind of here you have a more reasonable amount of space to enter text. All right, so we've looked at 2 different ways to enter text using HTML5. First, we have the input type equals text with the ID and the name, and that's associated with a label. And remember, the for attribute of the label value has to match the name, or the ID of the input. So the for matches the ID of the input. In order to get it passed to the server, in our case process.php, we actually need our name attribute. The second way to do text is to have a text area. It still has an ID, and actually instead of for, that should be name, because the label is for. So name equals life story. Columns 75, rows equals 5. It's not going to change anything here. Type your life story and off we go. And we can actually put some default text in the text area by putting it inside the text area element. So there you've got input type equals text and text area to get text from the user.